And we are back for the first round of the women's candidates in Toronto. And the games got so spicy, they short circuited our system. So let's dive into the bird's eye view and have a look at the game developments. So let's dive in because we can see that there are two end games in play between Salimova against Mozicuk. That one looks quite even. And in the bottom left corner, we can also see Tan Zhongyi against Lei Tingjie. Tan Zhongyi with the black pieces, she is a pawn up, but now another set of rooks have left the board. But there is one thing that I'm instinctively drawn to, and that is the game between Vaishali against Humpy, because take a look at that clock situation. It is troubling for the young Indian player.
Yeah, I mean, we basically have time trouble galore right now. And Humby's actually been thinking on this recapture now for a few minutes. Vaishali took a tremendously long think and wound up playing knight takes f6 check. And here, the instinct is to just capture with the queen and move on to the next decision. But essentially, Humpy's really considering recapturing with bishop takes f6, I think in part because she doesn't want to allow this freeing c4 break, which would essentially ensure that the bishop on b2 has breathes some life again into the position. But you're inviting queen takes e6, f takes e6, and you have to ask yourself, how problematic are those double pawns? Because in the long term, the e5 pawn in particular could be a massive target. And so this is what's being weighed right now. Humpy can afford to take the time here, so we'll see what she does. I think personally, I would have played queen takes f6 a long time ago and moved on to the next decision. But I think the point is, if you do play queen takes f6, c4 might actually just fizzle out the game.
Oh,
I'm not
yeah,
certain. Okay, the evaluation bar just screamed at me.
yeah,
Oh,
and
I see
Queen
it.
e6.
Yeah,
Queen
that's just a
e6,
pin.
and the engine shows us how it's so clinical. Queen e6 pin, and it's quite funny because we've had our eyes on that pin for quite a while, and now it's making a reappearance. Brilliant. Okay,
It's so
so
funny
queen
how
to e6.
the moves you go back, like when you go back to a square where it was not impactful a moment ago, but then it's super impactful and the evaluation totally changes.
Yeah, but then why not play? Why not just play queen takes f6 and, like you say, get ready to come in with your rook to d3 if you're allowed. I mean, the big question though is it's not really much for black. I would say neither side have an advantage. It looks pretty level because there has to be a standoff between the pawns on a5 and b4. You need to be able to stop c4, and white needs to keep an eye on b5. So white doesn't also want to be determined in situation.
Let
So
me
I
say
guess
this.
rook d1.
Well, Rook D1 definitely makes a lot of sense. But I will say black has a few very minuscule advantages that might add up to something meaningful with some help with an additional mistake from white. One is that black's already made an escape square. So just having the pawn in h6, white not having done that yet could be a huge tempo difference at some point. Also, if the A pawns come off the board and there's AB4, AB4, of course, white probably would take with the C pawn in most positions. But let's say AB4, AB4 happened and under some
Let's
circumstance.
just go like this, like
Well,
this.
all of a sudden, the black's queen side pawn structure might be more, harmonious, especially because it complements that dark squared bishop, whereas the white queen side pawns don't don't do the same because they block the counterpart on the white bishop on b2. And so if you combine some of those things, and then also the rooks, I can argue that black's rooks are slightly better than white's because there's the A and the D file at black's disposal, whereas the rook on E1 is not great. The flip side of that is the knight on C6 is not a great piece. It's one of these Italian knights that's restricted by that C3 pawn, as you're illustrating there, and that's something that's not ideal. So I think black might be on the better side of equal, but who knows?
Yeah. Uh, yes. Who knows? But the thing is, though, Humpy's been thinking for such a long time. Is she seriously considering bishop takes knight?
I guess the question is, what's your follow-up with black if you're going to make such a radical decision? Like, if I'm going to double my pawns, it's usually because I have some direct paths in, and the knight on c6 still doesn't have any squares forward. The bishop on f6 then becomes a really purely defensive piece, that black bishop that's blocked by the e5 pawn. And so I'm not impressed with the follow-ups. And so I think when you take this like radical anti-positional decision, it's because you have something concrete uh, ahead of you, or some threats or something like that. Like we saw, Salimova with this early f4 move trying to trap a bishop potentially. I don't see any of that sauce here.
No, I don't see anything either. I mean, this knight on c6 is really in the way because the move that I'd love to play is c5.
Yeah,
Just to really amp up the pressure on the queen side. But this is going to be difficult to do.
and we have some moves. We do have some moves. Um,
Okay, queen takes f6. Makes sense. Rook a to d1. And take a look at that clock time. Vaishali now 6 minutes and 22 seconds, whereas they're only on move 19.
They got to get to move 40, folks. Move 40 to get an extra 30 minutes. We are a long way from 40 right now. So Vaishali is going to have to pump them out. And okay, we got bishop d6, makes some sense. Really what it does, honestly, it might not objectively be the best move. Who knows? It avoids trades. So it's like saying, okay, we're going to keep the rooks on the board a little bit more. It's one of those subtle moves that conveys ambition.
It does. It does. It certainly does that because you're keeping all the pieces on the board, and if you can just get this knight into the game, just really want to be moving it to e7, maybe take it on an epic adventure over to f4. And again, I'm drawn to this idea of c5, but of course, there's two people playing, and b5 is the target.
Yeah,
So you've got to have an answer to rook to b d5.
I was actually wondering if rook d5 is a threat, because maybe I can go knight e7 anyway. And then if you go rook takes b7, am I flying too close to the sun with c6? Like that. This is kind of what I was thinking. But okay, the rook has the b7 square. Disregard. I was wondering if it was getting trapped over there, but it's not even close. So more solid measures can be taken to deal with this. And again, I
I
think
guess,
the simple moves will probably be helpful, given, again, Vaishali's in time trouble now. So
yeah. And I was also drawn to this idea, queen to e6.
that's a
It
nice
worked
one.
once. Why not again? Yeah, but Vaishali, under 5 minutes on the clock.
So, so,
Move
so yeah,
19.
so if we, yeah, but right here, this is the position, bishop d6. And we're just going to stay here, frankly. I mean, this is extreme time trouble. Again, this is Vaishali's first crack at the apple in the candidates, hugely important career event. And this is what it looks like. This is what the stakes, the pressure can look like. And her position is very healthy. So it's just a matter of navigating this. And yeah, I can recall in previous candidates time trouble being a thing for younger players, which is almost counterintuitive because you think the younger players are the fastest, but I have seen it in the past moments of this event. So you get to this
Yeah.
place for the first time and you want to get everything right, and yeah.
It is true. I mean, we saw Ali Reza Firouzja in the last candidates. He had a poor showing at his debut, and I think it's a bit worrying because Vaishali's style is to play active, and I'm sure in any other position she would first consider rook to d5. Because if she doesn't make an active move, then black is going to do, and I'm really drawn to my plan. I don't want to boast too much. Knight e7, knight g6, put that knight on f4, and suddenly it's just one-way traffic. So you got to get your counterplay somehow, and I'm also drawn to ideas of just hitting that break button, trying to completely just kind of diffuse the situation with moves like c4. Try to eliminate some of the pressure, activate this bishop on b2. Make
You
a
know,
move, Vaishali.
yeah, I think there there are some other options, right? We talked about this like knight coming to g6. You're playing with this knight coming to g6 and f4. You could consider repositioning this bishop, which is awful on b2, and play for some bishop c1 idea to just be ready for that. Okay, she made an active move. We have an active move. Vaishali did indeed play,
Rook to
and she played
d5.
rook d5. And that's the active choice. I think it's really well met by rook b8, though. I don't know which rook to put there. Maybe rook. I think rook. I think rook db8 just because you get out of any pins and you make sure your rook on the a file has that um, still has that open file in the event that the bishop or queen leave can leave the control of those squares on the white side of the a file.
Yeah. And because I'm worried about this plan of knight to e7, I'm just wondering whether you can completely diffuse the situation by going c4. I don't care what it takes. This bishop on b2 needs to be in the game.
Oh, I really like that. I think that is the professional choice when you realize I'm in time trouble. I don't objectively have a much better position than my opponent. My one concern though with C4, frankly, is they're gonna be exchanges with all the A and B pawns, and I'm very worried that I have back rank problems and these rooks are opening up. Like that's my fear.
Yeah, but there's a lot of things to calculate here. So here, because knight to a5 is a big threat,
Ooh,
so moves like c takes, yeah, I'm thinking b takes
but
a3
then
for starters.
BA3, right? And the rook and
BA3
the
is
queen.
bad. So your hands are tied behind your back. But you do have and this is something that where the Indian youngsters are excellent at. They're excellent at the counterattack. C5.
But then there's a bunch. It's like a mess because you have to calculate the black pawn taking on a3, and then you taking on d6, and then taking on b2, and then taking on c. That is a lot to manage with 3 minutes. So that is all.
Yeah.
That's mental gymnastics for sure. And then you have to worry about rook a1 dynamics sometimes. Not now because the b8 rook is hanging, but
Yeah.
whew, that's a lot.
But you might be in time. Queen takes b2, and then this pawn on b5 is hanging. But it completely is a lot because you also have to wonder about this pawn on b5. Will it stay alive? And okay,
And we have a move. We have a
we do
move.
have a move. Okay, what was played?
We got
Rook db8.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So again, very sad. These are professional decisions by Humpy. She is basically passing the baton back to Vaishali, saying, "You show me something," and it's really, really clever. I think the instinct when someone is down on time, I've done it myself a bunch to is to basically play on that time, play really quickly, but really more so than playing on the time. What I mean to say is make some active moves. Whereas the calm moves let your opponent kind of fall on the sword in some way. And so, okay, rookie d1 now, doubling the rooks. That bishop on
Okay, but
d6
now
isn't moving.
right, and this knight now is going to come to e7. My plan on knight to g6. Start improving the worst placed piece. And
Yeah,
this
rook.
beautiful thing, actually, this rook is better on b8 than it was on d8 because c4 is still not possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And rook d1 is nervy because, frankly, if the file's not opening, the rook on d1 is not really meaningful. And it also means that if the rook on d5 is attacked, you going to d2 blocks that c1 bishop from actually having anything to do with the f4 square. But if you put it on d3, then knight e7, knight g6, knight f4 might come with tempo. So
Mhm.
now all of a sudden you have to think about where you move the rook bet if you're actually attacked with knight e7.
Yeah. And your thing comes into play about how this king is not very safe on g1. You kind of mentioned it in terms of the back rank issue, but if a knight comes on f4, queen and knight, they're a powerful combo. And this bishop on d6, excellent defensive piece.
Yeah.
And
And
if
it's
one rook moves away, c5 as well in the
no
air.
question. No question. And the other thing that's important, I think you can ask yourself, well, if you want to make an escape square, how do you do it? A lot of times, a good rule of thumb when your opponent only has one bishop is to make the escape square on the opposite color as their bishop. So instinctually, I would love to play g3 and king g2 if I can, because then I'm giving my king a light square, escape square. But again, the knight is on f3 is hanging. So the white needs a few of these consolidating moves, and you know, it's it might be hard to come by. The one good thing I think for Vaishali, and I'm sure she's doing it right now, is she's thinking on her opponent's time, and she's for sure anticipating knight e7. So this is something that definitely is kind of a nice thing in a way, is if you're kind of anticipating your opponent's choice. And I think what Humpy is doing in turn is saying, okay, I know the obvious move is knight e7. Do I have anything else that she won't have calculated? Do I have any important questions I can ask instead of knight e7? Because then it'd throw her into one more long think, which might have her clock get to 0.
Yeah, I could think of one cheapo, but it is just a cheapo, queen to e6, with the
I like
idea of
that.
knight to e7.
It's a sensible one. It's a sensible cheapo. I mean, it's not even and honestly, in some positions, maybe your queen wants access to the light squares on that diagonal. Maybe you want your queen to mosey into c4. Maybe it's interesting. Actually, if the queen leaves b3, now I think about it, some point a b4 and rook a2 could be attractive. If, you not right away, because you could capture the c
Yeah,
pawn instead, but that might be something to think about as well.
yeah, completely. And we were talking about putting the knight onto f4, but don't also underestimate this idea of rerouting the knight to c4.
Yeah.
And
Oh
then
my
your
goodness.
idea of playing a takes b4 is going to be very, very dangerous.
Trouble in paradise if that happens. My goodness. If you could pick up the knight on c6 and bring to c4, black would be really close to something way more serious. So I should also mention that Li Tingje is a pawn down with 5 minutes left. So this is not the only game with these problems. And we're going to stick with this one, just given the nature of the situation. And queen e6 was played. Your move was
Queen e6.
played.
Well,
So
with a devious threat of a knight to e7, just attacking this rook, which cannot move on account of this loose queen on b3. Vaishali now, well, she's ticking down under 2.5 minutes. And I gotta admit, the whole situation is making me tense.
and look at them on screen there. I mean, I must say Vaishali looks pretty composed right now, although she did change her posture ever so slightly there. Now the fists and face posture and the cheeks posture. We've all done this one before, right? I've done
Mhm.
this one many a time. But yeah, it's decision time under 2 minutes.
Under 2 minutes. And taking a look at the bird's eye view and having a look at the other games, it does look like Salimova against Mozicuk, that is fizzling out into a draw. And if we just quickly cast our eyes on the game between Lagno and Garyatkina, ooh, tense, tense one
Yeah,
there.
there's definitely some attacking pressure on f2, but let's go back to Vaishali, just because she is under a minute and a half and needs 19 moves to get to get out of dodge, and I think something is going to happen very, very shortly. So I think we ought to probably focus on that one. Um, and this is critical. We're about to hit a minute.
A minute
Oh
left.
my. Oh my.
Oh,
I'm getting anxious. My this is not. It's hard to watch sometimes. Just because it's you know, you've been there before, right, Jovi? You know what it's like to be there, and it's like, oh, it's so nervy.
okay, she moves her queen. Queen c2, and ooh, okay.
Now, folks, you do get 30 seconds increment. So 30 seconds is added to your time when you make a move after every move, but still.
Knight to e7, quickly played by Humpy. The rook has to drop down. Where to go? That is a big choice for Vaishali. Does she drop it to the third row? In which case, Humpy will be rerouting her knight to f4 to attack it with tempo. Will she just simply drop it all the way down to d2, where it looks a little bit more safer, but somehow more passive?
You know what?
And
You could go g3 in different positions now. The queen is on e6. So the
uh-huh.
knight on f3 is not hanging. So if the rook goes back, knight g6, you can elect to cover the square on f4 g3, although then that queen on e6 might swoop into light squares like g4, h3, but I'm
Rook
nervous.
d3 played.
Yeah, sensible.
Still a good idea, I feel, to go knight to g6, just to provoke that small little weakness. The knight is spoilt for choice.
Yeah, knight g6. Do you think maybe she went rook, but Vaishali went rook d3 to respond to knight g6 with bishop c1? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But I think the issue now is going to be just getting this bishop away from d6 in order to break open with c5.
You know what? The more I look at it now, I actually don't think c5 will ever be played because it makes the rooks on the d file ineffectual. And what about your idea, right? You're saying putting that knight on c4? How crazy is knight c8?
Well, that was the intention to begin with, but you do have to calculate the consequences of moves. Like, is the time going to be right for? Hang on, wait a second. I can always go knight to d2, even though it's not the best move.
And then knight b6, and then I'm happy. Now your rooks are kind
I
of
can also
weird.
go rook to d5 as well. So if you go knight c8, just to put it on the board, rook can come to d5. Although c6.
Ah, okay. Okay, yeah, no, rook d5 is annoying because I still don't actually want to play c6 in a way. Like my bishop actually is kind of anchored there, and then as soon as I push the c pawn, I'm not anchored in the same way, but man.
Okay, go
All right,
back to the position. Knight
knight
c8
c8.
played. Yes,
Okay,
the
here we
knight is
go.
headed to c4.
So we were like, imagine this knight, we pick it up and, drop it on c4, and all of a sudden, Humpy's making the time to actually do it. That's remarkable. If this knight gets to c4 unscathed, we will have to golf clap this at the a bit later.
Yeah. Well, Vaishali has one thing though. The knight can get to d2.
Ooh, knight d2, curling
Yeah.
into a ball. I'm concerned.
Yes, it is a little bit concerning, but I think she can hold it, and we'll keep our eyes on this. But let's go over to the game between Goryashkina against Katerina Lagno. Let's get it on that game, and let's see how that one's developed.
Pressure.
Pressure for black, that's for sure.
What's going
Pressure
on?
on the
So
f9. And also, what about this? What about, can these pawns start marching forward at the right time? Knight comes to d5. Oh, what is she going to play? Knight to e7.
So they actually are much closer to move 40 than the other game we were looking at. So this isn't the same level of extreme time trouble at all. But I like your idea of like trying to, massage the king side a little bit further with h4 at some point. I think maybe at this juncture it's a bit too loose, but I like this idea in a little bit. I think to me, just maybe to further your h4 idea, I would love to just play king g7 and like prophylactically shield my king on
Yeah.
from any checks or anything like that, and then proceed. Oh,
Queen
queen
to
g4.
g4. Beautiful move. Because actually, I was wondering whether white could play queen to g5 themselves. Queen to
Mm.
g4. Okay, but now knight to e3.
And then maybe
Knight to
queen
queen
g5
to
with a pin.
g5.
But then what if I go
Then it
knight d5 back and try to trade with you?
exactly. Could we see a repetition with the moves knight to e3, queen goes somewhere, and then the knight just comes back? Draw.
So what would be the argument for a repetition from black side? I could see white's point, but would it be? I guess you said it that we said at the beginning of the show, Lochno has never beaten Gorechkina, so maybe that's maybe buzzing in her head a little bit. It is a black game in the candidates. Every black game you play against really strong opposition that is well prepared if you hold it together, it's a success technically, right?
Yeah.
So maybe
A-
those are some of the thoughts.
And we're seeing a repetition. The queen has come back to g4. Goryechkina pauses. Knight to
Oh, this
e3.
way. So just going back to e6, perhaps. You know what's funny is if you get a few more moves now with the queen on g4, h4 is such a thing. H4, h3 is a thing. So, and
Uh-huh.
we see them repeating here.
They are repeating. And well, she's making her intentions very clear.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
after knight to d5, the best move is to go queen to g4. You want to be covering this g5 square. Somehow, if you want to create something, you've got to be putting your queen somewhere on the king side. h4, g5, anywhere to get going.
Yeah, so it appears this one is basically, I think, gonna basically home. It's essentially gonna be a repetition in a moment if things continue. And I think the
Well, let's
story of
see.
this game, if we were to sum this up a touch prematurely, as we see Gorechkina look down at her score sheet to verify if there's been a repetition or whether she should claim at this point. Okay, she's
Oh,
stopping the
she stopped the
clock.
clock. She's calling over the arbiter. She's ridden the move. She knows exactly how to claim the draw. And she's going to say that once she puts her knight on d5, the position will have repeated 3 times, and that will be declared a draw.
Okay, wow.
Says yes.
So to sum that one up, just very briefly before we move on, I think it was pretty good preparation, we can say, by Lochno. She definitely got the better of Gretchina in the opening. It was like a kind of a Sicilian Roslimo that turned into a Rui Lopez, and then all of a sudden there was a surprising attack that didn't quite work out with this knight sacrifice. The knight came back, and then all of a sudden there was a bit of a tug of war where Black was playing, but
Yeah.
eventually fizzled. So here we are.
I think a very tense start, actually. And we're looking at the bird's eye view. Let's head over to Anna Muzichuk against Salimova because, well, I mentioned that this game looked like it could fizzle out. Well, the pawns are all level. It's a rook and pawn ending. And you know what they say? All rook and pawn endings are drawn. What can we expect here? Rook will come up to g5. Is there any chance for anyone to try to massage out a small advantage?
Well, I'll tell you what, if you gave me as Black 2 or 3 moves, I would say yes, because White's pawns are split on the queen side. So if I could get in, again, if I can get in 2 moves, which would be h5 and rook g5, all of a sudden I'll be pressing, because then you can't play g4 easily. Your rook on d1 would be a defender of the g3 pawn, and then my king on e7 could mosey over to c6, and then I could start to at least press. Now
Well,
there's White's turn. I think rook e1 check. If king d7, then there's rook f1, and then you can infiltrate on the f file. And I think there might be a little shuffle here like that. And so that would be the thought here. Although maybe after rook f1, there's king e6. So, but I think you could also just go king e7 and shut things down. You can go rook f1,
yeah.
king d7, or rook e1, king d7, rook f1, king e7.
Just keep shuffling the rook to f1 and e1, and the king will dance as well. And okay, king does move to d7,
Mm-hmm.
and now rook f1 looks good.
Yeah, that would be the move to kind of create a threat and maybe force Black's hand a little bit. Rook
Yep,
d1.
check.
Okay,
Okay,
similar
now it's
dynamic actually.
yeah, but maybe this one allows the king to c6. But no, she's very content with the draw. King to e7, and now the players will shuffle. There will be continual checks, and this game will also finish in a draw.
Wow. We might get a claim here very momentarily. I see they've uh, up
Oh,
in there we have this handshake there, and I think you could you can offer the hand because they're also at move 40. So, um, but yeah, what can we say about that? That was a very interesting game. There was a Petrov that was usually a two results game for white, but then all of a sudden Salimova got quite ambitious with this F4 move, right? And we talked about this for a long time, and trying to trap the bishop, and then it kind of it fizzled from there. But very very interesting stuff. And we got two games to go.
we
Vaishali
got to
was in
head back.
terrible time trouble. Yeah, we got to go back to this.
We got to go
And
back to the time travel. Yeah.
what's happened?
I, uh, I, uh, I mean, I feel that this first round has been full of tense moments, and this game is just full of them. Taking a look at still move 27, Vaishali playing with her last minute. Remember, she will be getting a 30-second time bonus after every move, so the situation is not as critical as it first appears, but
I must
still
say,
problems to be solved in her position.
Jovi, I'm very worried about Black's position. I can see knight f5, rook g3, and then all of a sudden, the Humpy, the player we said does not like to be attacked, all of a sudden has to deal with some tactical threats. I'm very concerned. Knight f5, rook g3 is in the cards.
Yeah, knight f5 is in the cards. Well, pawn takes pawn, played. This is your idea, working in motion. Pawn takes a takes b4. Or is she going to throw in knight to f5? Go all in.
Hey, we'll probably transpose either way, I guess, right? Maybe like knight f5, bishop f8, and then you take on b4. But I do think it's a well-timed a b4 from Black, though, just because we're talking about all these positions where uh, cb4 was the move, and now you can't. Whoa! I was gonna
cb4.
say, I was gonna say now you can't quite do it because the queens come off, and then it's one-way traffic, and that is a
Oh,
surprise to me. Basically, if a before happened, the rook on a8 could infiltrate at some point on a2, and so that was a concern. But this is also going to mean that the a pawn is backward on a3, and that basically there's an ever so slight tug based upon the c4 square. So um, interesting choice. Not a one that really changes things that much, but the attacking player that we've commended Vaishali for being now is going to have to tough it out with no attacking chances. It's going to be, really responsible defense.
yeah. So, of course, the queens will come off. And then the question is, do you lash out with c5 or do you just simply build your position up?
If you
Well,
trade that one, then I think maybe too much comes off, right? Or do we?
yeah.
It depends on what Humpy wants right now. Does Humpy think if you were Humpy, you've been the Humpy expert today. If you were Humpy, do you want to play this out for more? How do you think you have realistic chances that are worth grinding for another 20, 30,
Yes.
40 moves?
Yes, Humpy will be in her element, but I don't think she will be playing like I'm suggesting with c5. That's maybe got a touch of impatience about it. I think she'll just be improving her position and she'll save c5 for when the time is right. Perhaps when Vaishali makes a small mistake. But remember, Vaishali, less than a minute on the clock. And now is an easy plan for Humpy. She will trade a set of rooks. She will come in with a knight to c4, improve her king side, maybe going f6, king f7, get that king to e6, and just wait for white to come up with a plan.
It just dawned on me why rook d8 is so strong. You can't really go knight c4 too quickly because sometimes the rook can invade on d5 or d7. Now with the rook on d8, you're not going to have that luxury. And if rook takes d8 happened, I reckon that Humpy would actually recapture with the bishop because as long as the knight is on b6, there are no entry squares for the lone white rook on any of the on squares on the d file in black side of the board. d5 would be covered by the knight on b6, d6 would be covered by the pawn on c7, d7 would be covered by the knight again. And that means that with one pair of rooks, actually, white doesn't really have any active counterplay. And so this is kind of scary hours because if you just kind of chill, eventually the king will come to e6, and then the knight will go to c4. Um, I really rook d8 is really, really
Classy
smart.
move, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, objectively, I think this position is equal, but Humpy will be putting the pressure on. Get that king to e6. It's just a case of just making those small improvements. And this bishop on c1, I don't think it can actually move. This knight on c2, unless it's going to e3,
Yeah.
but even then, it doesn't have that much of a future for it because this bishop can then come to g5. And you
I
might have a scenario where it's bad bishop on c1 against great knight on b6. So, ooh,
if
Vaishali needs to be careful here.
Yeah, and the only thing now is Humpy all of a sudden has time trouble to contend with as well. We're still 10 minutes out. Um, uh, Vaishali's done well, we must say. She steered the game away from major danger. And I mean, am I going to be able to say that Vaishali is up on time in a moment? Who would have thunk it?
I'm not sure. She might well be even on time, but I do feel that she will be struggling a little bit on position because the more I'm looking at it, I'm really liking your idea of just trading off a set of rooks and then improving the position. Maybe bringing the king into the game.
Yeah,
The
both
knight,
sides need their
this
king.
knight can't move to e3 because of bishop to g5. As long as she keeps this rook away from the d5 square, Humpy can just continue building her position up.
You know what's annoying though? We were talking about this bishop g5 move, and it's so important. A lot of times, you thinking of entering with your king with king f7, king e6, that would cut off the bishop
Yeah.
g5 idea. So then knight e3 actually all of a sudden becomes really viable. So I think maybe Humpy's noticing that now, and oh my gosh, she's lower on time than Vaishali. I mean, this is again, who would have thought? Who would have thought?
Okay, rook to d8.
Oh,
Ah, no,
hard.
that wasn't
I
what
think
I was expecting.
that's an emergency break move, basically. That's like, I thought I was playing for something. Now I recognize that my king can't come to the center the way I wanted it to. I'm making sure there's nothing that can really harm me here. And yeah, I think this one is gonna. I think we're gonna have a draw for shortly after move 40.
But hang on a second. We've seen now two moves that simplify. Rook takes d3. Now white, I feel, is a little bit better. White's king is better placed. It's not so important that a knight can get to c4 because you can just destabilize it with a4. And now king to f8.
Yeah, but the pawn structure. So if the white pawns on the queen side were in a configuration that was just ever so slightly different, like if the white pawns were on a2 and b3, for instance, I'd say yeah, maybe there's something to work with. But just with the pawns being the way they are, there's no meaningful excursions
Mhm.
that white can make with the pawns. So you could shuffle with your pieces, maybe go bishop e3, maybe even knight a1, knight b3 or something. But as soon
Yeah.
as you get frisky, I think we might not have a real. Uh,
Okay.
I'd just be
Well,
surprised if it goes anywhere.
yeah, I'm also surprised. Now the situation is clarified in this game. Let's head over to the Leiting J against Tan Zhongyi because here we can see oh, 1.5 minutes on the clock. Move 37, but she is a pawn down.
And she's been a pawn down for a long time, and the grind has been on for a very long time as well, right? So the bailout happened on move 24. We were noticing this queen f4 move because the attack was really scary. And once the doubled f pawns were on the board, black was able to Tanzhongi was able to round one of them up, and ever since then, it's been a a struggle to kind of you know get compensation or get some initiative for that pawn. The question right here is, can white hold this, or conversely, how does black put more pressure? I think black has done a fabulous job of conjuring up pressure because right now I see several appealing ideas for black and less ideas for white. If you could pick that pawn on a3 and put it somewhere on the king side, um, the chances of holding this would be a lot better, because essentially there's a 4 versus 2 if you just look at the position from the D file
Yeah.
onward, and the a pawn is actually in the way of the white rooks being helpful in defense in some ways. So tough, tough.
It is very tough, and also I just can't help but be drawn to this idea of just somehow trying to get a g5, g4 pawn advance, boot this bishop away from the defense of g2, and
Yeah.
even give up the d5 pawn in order to get it done. King f6. So big threat on the board of g5, g4, and just chasing away this bishop. You know what I really wanted to do with white? I wanted to, whilst my opponent's not looking, is switch the a pawn around with the rook.
Yeah. That would be helpful.
That
And then
would be
all of a
nice,
sudden,
wouldn't it?
very different story. Very different story. Um, I must say, I think here for white, you h4 is really the a must, frankly. And the reason is you would, if you get a if we trade the a pawn and the d pawn, we just pick those off the board. The 3 versus 2 is a draw. Um,
Mhm.
Rook a6 is also very clever, actually, just freezing and threatening. Now, actually, you're stopping g5 because there's king e3 and bishop takes d5 ideas,
Yep.
which would get the pawn. But if you take off the a and the d pawn, and it's a 3 versus 2, pawns on the same side, king's in reasonable defensive position, it's a draw with best play. And so that's kind of what you're kind of steering for. And what black is trying to do with up a pawn is encroach further on white side of the board, seize more territory before, really taking concrete action. And so white needs to stop that. And h4 shores up
Mm.
that that encroachment.
Okay. Well, let's pause on this game because let's go back to the game between Vaishali and Humpy and see how things are developing there. Well, we see Vaishali low on the clock, but her position is very, very stable. No danger here whatsoever. F3 played in inviting Humpy to play at knight takes bishop, but this would be a mistake because the position is relatively closed and knights work best in closed positions.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
unless that you can force it. Suddenly, suddenly saw.
yeah, you might. I mean, I think it's basically simplified enough that it's not such a big deal. But um, if black could force through c5 here, it's probably almost all the pawns get traded. Then play like c5, like knight takes e3, and then c5. Might get us nearly home. And I think the key feature here is that, again, white's queenside pawns being on dark squares means that the bishop always has work. And that's, I
Mhm.
think, kind of the prevailing feature here. You can't even entertain any good knight, bad bishop type of dynamics because the bishop is consistently going to be hitting at one of the white queenside pawns.
And there's no entry squares for the white king as well to make their way. So let's go back to the position, see what happens next. F3, Humpy. It's move 36, and now she is ticking down to 40 seconds.
Wow. I cannot believe I did not think I'd be able to say that white was going to be up, or Vaishali was going to be up on time ever. And if but for a moment, it's just an amazing, it's great tenacity, right? You're down on time for so long and then you crawl back. But hold on, we're under 20 seconds.
It is under
Vaishali,
20 seconds, and a decision time has to be made. I was wondering whether she would go bishop c5, offer up a trade. No, the bishop comes to a7.
wow.
It's a nice
Okay.
move.
So there's a threat here, folks. A4 is a huge threat, because if that A pawn becomes a protected passer, slightly different story. So this knight on c4 now might be a little bit loose. I'd move it away. I'm not allowing a4 and then a5. Um, so that would be quite the turn of events.
Yeah, it would. Well, how to handle that one? Because after knight to d6, I guess this bishop could come to c5, and then I guess you just drop back to no. But then you're allowing a4 again.
Yeah, maybe knight
Decisions.
b7 even. Just something that does not allow a4, a5. And yeah,
Okay, knight
Humpy,
to d6.
classy, classy, fiscally responsible.
37 moves. And remember, once the players pass move 40, they do get extra half hour on the clocks.
Yeah. So we're almost there, almost at that point.
19 seconds. What do you think Vaishali will play? Because actually, both players, they're not allowed to offer draws until they pass move 40,
yeah,
but
bishop
they will be
c5.
looking at ways to neutralize or to at least offer a draw
Hmm. Yeah,
without
we've seen
saying so.
a few of those informal draw offers before move 40 with these repetitions, but it's also a sensible move. So
Knight b7.
um,
Knight
yeah,
b7 played.
mm, I yeah, bishop a7 or bishop takes c7, either is fine. Um, I'm actually inclined to keep the bishop still, just because I just don't love the a pawn being backward. It hurts my soul a little bit. Um, so I'd still probably go bishop a7 or bishop somewhere.
Yeah, I like bishop a7. You're repeating position, the moves, especially after knight to d6. You get ever closer to that draw. Bishop a7 back.
Here are the
It's
mind
move
games.
39.
To repeat or not to repeat? That is the question.
Yeah, I think it's time to repeat. Remember, this is a 14 round grueling event.
Whew.
It's time to save the energy. And knight to d6 indeed played.
And again, I think we talked about how to. We saw Grechkina write the move down and then call the arbiter. I must say, I've never done that in my career. Um, I've never claimed a draw, and it's a useful skill to have in your holster.
Yeah, knight to b7. The players are heading towards the repetition. Bishop a7. They made eye contact with each other. This is very important. And there we see a handshake. And it is a draw between Vaishali and Humpy Koneru. And what a game it was, full of tension. At some point, I'm not going to lie, I thought that Vaishali was under severe trouble, especially on the clock when she was down to her final minute. But she defended tenaciously, and it is a draw between the two Indian players.
It was not without drama. I mean, basically, Humpy had a huge time advantage and maybe a slight, ever so slight, pull on the position, and yeah, it was a tough one to navigate, but she did do so in a very very well, and all of a sudden we are down to our last game here in the Chinese affair between Tan Zhongyi and Lei Tingzhe, and things have changed for the worse for Lei. And I think it's interesting because we spoke about this h4 move being important to kind of fix black's pawn on the light squares, but what happened here was that the black king got to e5, and so all of a sudden the king on g3 is boxed out. And people talk about opposition and shouldering and all that stuff. I'm a big basketball guy, so I always think about like boxing out, like rebounding in basketball. The king on g3 is being controlled really nicely by the king on a5, and it allows the black king, to get in further via d4. So I'm wondering, a move or two ago, what happened with the king actually getting to e5? What was that needed? Because
She
after
attacked the.
h4, rook h1 was played, and so the king just elected to defend the pawn on h4. Really instructive, though, that g3 didn't work either, because g3, I think, for a lot of people might be a natural move to just defend the pawn and so on and keep the structure together and not allow the king in. But then you have new problems because of this pin that forces the king back anyway.
Yep.
And so, very interesting. And it turns out, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if the bar changed this much, Probably the only move was bishop takes d5. Um,
Yeah, but that one is a difficult one to go into because there you're going to go into a situation where there's 3 pawns against one. It's a 2-pawn advantage, and there there are only exceptions to the position where it is a draw. Most of the time, it's going to be a loss. So I can understand why Lei Tingjie, not much time on the clock. Remember, this is the critical move. 40 decided to play it safe and just retreat the king to g3, and it did allow king to e5. And now we see that Lei is on the back foot against Tang Zhongyi. We've had 3 results finish, 3 not so peaceful draws between the other players. And I think it's the perfect time for us to take a short break. But so you can stock up on chess merch at the Chess.com shop. We've got you covered with new t-shirt designs, mittens, plushies, and accessories. So head to go.chess.com/merch or use !merch in chat to shop now before it's all sold out. So see you after the break.
Hello, I'm Alexandra Kostyniuk, the 12th Women's World Chess Champion. And today I'm gonna show you a very special move that I made in one of my games. On the position on the diagram, you see me playing black against Dinara Dargieva in 2018 Russian Team Chess Championship. It's black to move. How would you proceed? My pawn is on f2 and it's about to get promoted. The question is to what piece? Well, I under-promoted the pawn into a rook. Let's see what would have happened if I'd promote my pawn into a queen. In that case, after queen takes d2, and now I need your help. This situation in Russian and this particular queen is called a mad queen because it keeps self-sacrificing for a stalemate. And if black accepts, well, in this particular situation there is no way to avoid it. If black takes white queen, it's a stalemate. So what is this term called in English? I'm waiting for your comments. And let's get back to the game. In the game I played, as I already mentioned, f1 rook, and it changes everything. So queen takes d2 doesn't work anymore because I just simply take, and the h3 square is here for the king. And in the game actually continued with queen to c6, and in that case I played rook g to f4, and in this very funny situation my opponent resigned. Have you seen such a position with 3 rooks against the queen? So that's a very funny, maybe not the best move of my career, but certainly the most unexpected one. I hope that you like this move, and I wish you to make something similar in your games. Thank you for watching, all the best, see you soon.
Has this ever happened to you?
Oh, shoot! Another mouse slip.
What about this?
Oh, well, holy bishops en passant. I think I'm getting carpal tunnel. If only there was a way to play online chess with a real-life board.
What if I told you you can with Chess Up 2? That's right. With Chess Up 2, you can now play over the board online.
Wow!
Simply connect your Chess.com account to our state-of-the-art Chess Up 2 and get a game started. Every time you move, our revolutionary board will transmit the data online directly to your opponent. And as soon as they move, squares will light up, signifying which piece is going where.
Well, shucks. This Hikaru guy seems pretty good.
With Chess Up 2, mouse slips and sore wrists are a thing of the past.
My carpal tunnel is gone. Well, this sure is fun. I'm playing online against my new friend Hikaru. Who needs a family? But I sure do miss clicking on a piece and seeing all of my available moves, like they have on Chess.com.
Well, Danny, you're in luck. This feature is totally available on the Chess Up 2 as well.
Wow, Well, I'm convinced. But hey, what if I don't just want to play an opponent online? What if I want to use one of Chess.com's other great tools?
I thought you'd never ask. With Chess Up 2, you can fully take advantage of the Chess.com integration by playing bots, analyzing your offline games, and even using our optional AI assistants to visualize the quality of moves with color-coded hints.
Well, holy Chess Up, you did it. You made IRL chess cool again.
You got it, Danny.
And how do you know my name?
Play chess today on the board of tomorrow.
And we are back in Toronto for the last of our round one coverage of the women's candidates. 3 games have already finished, 3 results that have ended in a draw, but there is 1 game remaining between Lei Tingjie and Tan Zhongyi. And this one looks like it's going to be absolutely decisive in favor of Tan Zhongyi with the black pieces. We see it's an endgame. The king has mobilized. And White's king, as you mentioned, Casa, has been locked out of the game on g3. But shall we go back 1 move to move 40, where we see this move king to g3 being played?
Yeah, it's a really interesting moment because, first of all, this was move 40, which is, I cannot tell you how many times in chess history, and probably in our own chess careers, right, Jovi, that move 40 has made or break, or it's basically made or broken a game, right? And here, the only move to stay in the game was bishop takes d5, and we were discussing why this was such a difficult decision to make, but we didn't get to go all the way into it, and we're going to do that now. So basically, you're trading your d pawn for the h pawn, and typically when you're pawn down in rook endgames, it's extremely desirable to trade more pawns because you want to just get it down to 1 versus 0 ideally, and have your king in a defensive position to get what's called a Philidor. Probably not going to describe the Philidor in detail right now, but if you Google Philidor defense in chess, you'll be able to sort yourself out nicely. Now, the reason this is tricky is because you traded a pair of pawns, which is ideal, but it's the quality that you're left with. Because now you have 2 pawns, both isolated, and moreover, black's advantage is a 3 versus 1 on the king side, which seems to be an insurmountable dynamic because a lot of positions, if you have 2 connected passers versus nothing on one side, it's a win. And so irrespective of, white having a pawn somewhere else that's passed. And so that's the dynamic, is a 3-on-1 can turn into a 2 versus 0 on one side, which is what you don't want. This is a little different. And the difference is that after this king moves with check, probably to g3, right?
G3, attacking the rook.
No, the rook has to move somewhere. My instinct would probably be to go rook h1, honestly, but I'm not 100% sure.
Why not? It's a good move to get behind the a pawn. But
the critical thing, go for it, Joey, because there's a critical detail here, and it's that white gets to compromise black's pawn structure.
Exactly. Because if you wait, say for instance, if white goes a move like a4, well then unfortunately here you can go rook to e1. I just wonder whether that's okay. But then
that's honestly where
h4. That's what I was thinking as well. But I feel like maybe this is one of those nuanced endgames where it works on specific moves, because here a4 you can probably go h4, drive the king back to f2, and now you get to just come up with your king, and this pawn on a4 is just in the way of the rook. It looks like the rook on a6 is very active, but it actually isn't, because this rook can snake its way to a1 and drive this white king back. But instead of a4, if white were to play the move bishop takes bishop, f takes e6, and now here, I think this is the thing, you need to mobilize this rook on a6. It looks like it's active, but it's an illusion. It doesn't actually do a single thing. It needs to mobilize itself. It needs to go to a8 in order to start harassing these pawns. And the situation that we want to be facing ourselves is somehow or other we want to be swapping off the g pawn and the h pawn for these two pawns for whites, and then if black is just left with the e-pawn, it's going to be a draw. And then we might see this Philidor position that Casa was talking about.
Yeah, and it's so nuanced. Like we're doing our best to give you a very abridged version of frankly a very, very complicated decision. And you can imagine that under duress it's even worse. And so that's the dynamic. And the point is, I think I'm kind of trying to figure it out in real time, is with the rook coming from behind is so critical, is because if the black pawns, the G and H pawns, get just a little bit further down the board, it's too much with the rook on H1 going to A1 and harassing the king from the side, basically horizontally. It would be a mating net essentially. And
I think that. Yeah, just to add to your point, I just figured out as well, moving this pawn to a4 is a really bad move because it does allow rook a1 and rook a3 check, driving the white king backwards. So if you keep this pawn on a3, there is no rook a3 check. And what you got to do is just mobilize your rook on a8. You can even move it up to a5, just cut off the king, but you got to mobilize your rook. You got to keep this pawn on a3 in order to stop any of these rook checks. And then you just got to play accurate moves. The position is still very sharp, and I can understand why Lei, with seconds left on her clock, thought that it was much better to keep the pawn structure intact on the king side.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. And even honestly, there's even potential of the H pawn trading for the G pawn, the black H pawn trading for the G pawn, and then still having two passers, not connected, but still passers. That would have been a tough thing to defend as well. So nightmarish defense. Let's go to the current position, because I just noticed something in the current position that drew my eye, that made it it's a little bit further. The king is on d4, I think. Yeah, and it's why it's even more nightmarish than I thought. If you give me a few moves, Jovi, I'm gonna go king e3 and g5, and I actually have this idea of h4 mate. And so
we got to
it's
show that.
actually
Okay,
a mating net also.
Okay, let's show that. So if you go a5, you go king e3, la 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 la. I go rook a8, and then g5.
And there's nothing you can do. It's mate in one, no matter what. If you take, I push h4 mate. If you ignore it, then g takes h4 mate. And again, this king, I mean, some people call it opposition, some people call it shouldering. If you're a basketball guy like me, you're like, it's just this king is getting boxed out. And it's that critical feature that is it's why the bar is almost entirely black right now. And so this is what Lei Tengji is trying to figure out. How do I
Hang on a
get
second.
out of that mating net?
Well, hang on a second. I'm not sure she's seen it, because she just put her rook on a8. If she spotted that mating net, she would have put the rook on the b line.
Maybe she might deter it with rook g8. That would be my only thought, like, and just deter g5 manually that way, because the a pawn is a thing. But hard
the
to
d pawn
imagine.
is a thing.
Yeah. And king e3 is obligatory. Maybe what she was thinking actually was king e3, rook e8, and then trying to play bishop takes d5 tricks, and she might have missed this g5 concept.
Yeah. Okay, just to show that. King e3, if you go rook e8, g5. Oh, no.
It still works.
Yeah, it still works.
It's not mate anymore, but white has to sack an exchange.
Beautiful. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so king to e3. That's what we're expecting from Tan Zhongyi. Okay, is there any way to defend this. G5 is a massive, massive threat. Rook to
I,
b8, threatening rook to b3. I thought that that would had to be played.
then
Actually, I
d4,
thought,
d4. And not
yeah, and
only do
then
you not
okay,
have the check, I also can
I
just
have
block
this.
myself.
I have this, but I might have was it jumped out of the frying pan, but I've gone straight into the fire because d3.
Oh, yeah, that hurts.
Yeah,
And I'm not going to even let you sack the bishop for the pawn because I'm going to go bishop g4 at the right moment.
yeah.
And that d pawn is going to walk down the yellow brick road. So, wow. It must be said, like, the really, really impressive play. I mean, basically, Tan Zhongyi has been up a pawn for a while, but this was not a trivial conversion. It just also goes to show how much you have to maximize your pieces to be effective. And there we go.
King e3 on the board. And then certainly an impressive performance from Tan Zhongyi from her opening choice. She seemed to have anticipated that Lei could be opening up with d4. She had tricked her opponent. She got a very comfortable position, and she sensed that Lei wasn't the best defender, that she would panic. And because this mistake actually happened all the way back. What move was it? Queen, here you go.
24. Yeah.
24. 24. It was here where Lei just panicked and just went queen to f4. She saw that bishop takes h3 was a threat.
But it's
So she
so hard, like, because again, my instinct was to go queen h2 to parry this idea, and queen h2 isn't a good move because of bishop a6, which is like you're looking at the bishop focused on h3 the whole time, and then all of a sudden bishop a6 moving it to the other diagonal works, and because f2 is hanging, brutal. And so the best move in that position, instead of queen f4, was rook c1. Like, really? Like, you're just ignoring the bishop h3 dynamic, and you're ignoring it because then there's queen h2. Like, come on. Like, this is not human stuff. You know what I mean? So, really, really tough defense. Yeah.
But even then, you have to see that after rook f6, that there is no way to untangle this bishop and the queen. It's very, yeah, I agree. Rook ac1 would have been nerves of steel, but wow. But queen to f4 was the big mistake.
Yeah. And I think when you're a pawn down, you have to maximize your pieces, and like you trade pawns and you maximize the pieces to try and get to one of these drawn rook end games. And the issue in Lei Tengji's position the entire time was this king never got where it needed to go. We talked about it, that this king being on h1 in the early middle game and then being on h2, it just was meandering and not centralized. And so somehow Black's king beat it to the spot, and the spot was this e5 square. Once that king touched e5, it touched the center of the board, one of the central squares. It became a menace to society.
Yeah. But it did feel like somehow Lei was on the verge of saving it, but perhaps with not enough time on the clock. And I was thinking more along the lines of when she went king to f6. And I thought after rook a6, rook f1, maybe now it was maybe a mistake to go h4.
But if you don't go
What
h4, you're going to be pushed
then
back with your
g5?
idea with g5, right? That was
Yeah.
what you wanted all along. So it was, but even getting here was tough because if we actually missed the part a little bit before here, like if maybe right after the queen trade, let's say move 29 after rook takes c6, rook takes d4. We had this position, right, where you're pawn down. White's rooks are actually a little bit more active, I think, combined than Black's rooks. But Black's going to get this stability with bishop e6. And it's like, what do? The king on h2 is really out of the mix. And so it's like, do you trade a rook? Do you double on the c file? Do you put a rook on c7? But this king on h2 never got out of the doghouse.
Yeah. No, it was well, it was out of sight. Yeah. It's a difficult task here for whites, especially when you're stuck for a plan and also you're low on time. So
Yeah.
white endgames are super important. And anyhow, I love the fact that in the end it was the hero, the bishop that moved to g4, moved back to e6, went back to c8, goes back to e6. And literally that's all it's done with this life. And yet somehow it was the hero of the game. And going back to the main position, let's see what was played. King e3, rook to e8. Okay.
All right,
Are we going to see
G5, G5
g5?
for the
Are we going to
gallery.
see g4?
For the gallery. You gotta play G5 for the gallery. It's too beautiful to ignore.
Yeah. The crowd is demanding g5 the artistic way, but d4 is probably good enough. Actually,
Yeah.
it's more than good enough.
Yeah.
Past pawns must be pushed.
I get to win an exchange on the spot to stay. I think so. Here's the thing. G5 is the type of move that provokes a resignation. That's how I think about it, because it kills even any dream, because you have to give up your rook to stave off the checkmate, and then you still have a d pawn, right? So that's d4 might be just as nice, but d4 doesn't provoke the resignation. You know, it's like a slow jam.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's made Tan Zhongyi think. Okay, I predict d4, even though I want g5.
Fair, very fair, very professional.
It's irresistible, right? Just keep advancing the pawn.
But then I can
Follow the
advance. I can
yellow
go
brick road.
a5. I can go a5. You can go d3. I can go a6. We can. I mean, you could take two to tango there. You know, like it might get a little interesting. You know, might a little saucy. You know, so
Yeah.
that's my one retort
But
for that.
I have a trump card up my sleeve, though. I can always go g5.
Ah, okay. So you wanna tease me, and then just like,
Yes.
and then
Then
just
don't go
yeah,
g5. And just when you think
okay,
you're getting up to the a6 square with your pawn, I'm just going to go, okay, now I'm going to go g5. The end.
right, very well, very well. Yeah, king activity, folks. If this is not a good example of it, what matters more right now, the pawn or the king activity? It's the king activity. Like it's actually crazy. If you picked up the d5 pawn and threw it in the garbage, g5 would still be a huge problem, and
g5.
a winning problem. And there we see it.
g5, rook takes, bishop played.
And they're
Oh,
playing
hang on a
some more
second.
moves.
Is there... Well, there's some issues to be solved with this pawn on is going to start promoting. Well, not promoting, start marching its way forward. So you do have to be a little bit accurate.
I'm going to go
How
h4,
accurate?
h3.
I was looking at rook a1. Rook
That's
takes
even more
a4.
professional. That's more responsible. That is it is tax time here in the States. That is extremely fiscally responsible. So respect.
Yeah, well, I'm a materialist at heart. Yeah, because after all, the d pawn, as you mentioned, the d pawn is going to be the one that will win the game for black.
Yeah. So rook a1 is the safe, smart, sensible choice.
And you
If we want to
wanted?
be fancy, we're going to go h4 check. The king has to move, and then h3, and we're just going to manually clear the line for our rook. Because if you take on h3, I have rook g1 check, and if you ignore me, I still take and then go rook g1. So
Okay, so if I push on with g6 and I say,
then I
okay,
take on
how about
g2.
that? Okay. Bishop takes g2, and then you're
And
just
then I
going to
go all
slide
the
it
way
back.
back. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Although
And
to be
these
honest,
two pawns.
I'm not as enthusiastic about this anymore, because you do have king g5 here, and then I all of a sudden get a little scared. So I take this back. I don't like this
Well, hang on
anymore.
a second. This bishop doesn't have too many squares.
So what are you doing?
Oh,
This one's scary. This is scary to me. You have a g. There's a g pawn running. There's a pawn running. I think I got
yeah.
a little
Okay.
bit too frisky for my own good.
Okay,
Rook a8. Let's stick with
rook,
your
rook a8,
go to rook a8.
exactly.
Yeah,
No,
like
no need for any complex
no,
calculation. Let's just go rook a8,
no,
rook
no.
a1, rook a1. Take the a pawn and then just put your rook on a8 and bank on the d pawn and the e pawn winning the game. No
Yeah,
need for any fancy calculation.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the game is not over yet. There's still some work to be done. But what is your? Do you? I actually kind of learned something from this game about the Carlsbad structure because I'm just trying to think about like lessons or takeaways from the game because my main takeaway was that White's defensive resources are actually a little bit more than I think I appreciated. If there are a few different pieces traded, there were like a number of minor pieces. Oh, here we go. Hold on, is
Oh,
H4 happening? Okay.
oh,
Oh, this might
oh.
not be the last twist of the game.
King g4.
You could still go Rook A1 now,
Just
but
go
like,
rook a1. No,
but
she's going for your plan, h3.
oh man, this is now interesting.
Oh,
This now can you got to
okay. How
calculate.
narrow is the path? How narrow is the path to victory? Okay, so if I go g6, that's the only move I can think of because otherwise, as you highlighted, pawn takes pawn is going to be a big mistake because after rook to g1, this bishop falls. So obviously you don't want that. So g6 only move. Pawn takes pawn, or is there any other move here?
I suppose you can move your rook to, to
Yeah,
catch the
just move your
pawn,
rook
but
out of the way. Just get it to c8 or whatever, to b8, somewhere along the 8th line.
then it's like, why do you push your H pawn in the first place if you're gonna bring the rook back? Like it's like it's like inconsistent in a way. So that's what I'm saying. Okay, let's follow through with takes g2, right? But it's it's
Okay,
almost like
take
you
bishop
discover
takes
after
g2.
capturing on g2, you're like, oh, this is not clear.
Okay, and now here,
So king
white's
g5,
play,
right?
king g5,
Supporting
yes.
f g7.
Okay, now let's have a look at what happens after d4 and what
Then
happens after.
g7.
Yeah, what happens after? Okay, so king f2. Oh, this bishop would be lovely if it were trapped,
Oh wait,
but
it
is it?
is.
Yeah,
Wait,
it is, but it's not. At the same time, you got g7.
no,
Oh,
but I
hang on,
have
but
a
then rook
double
g8.
attack.
You got
Yeah.
rook g8. Ah, very good.
So that's the only clear way. That's the only clear way.
And there's no pawn race happening at the end of this? No.
Let's do let's say rook king f2 wasn't found. Let's just
Okay.
entertain it if but for a moment. Let's say d4 is played, right? Then it's a
Yeah.
race because now the a pawn has something to say as well, and this would be a nightmare to contend with. So g7,
So
rook f8, king f6,
king f6, d3, and we can go bishop h3.
Yeah, you got to catch that one. And then I have no idea how this.
Yeah, you have to go e5.
I think both pawns queen actually.
No. Yeah, you
Oh,
don't
I
want
was
that.
thinking I was thinking you'd go d2 actually.
I don't think it matters, right? So if I
It
go
doesn't.
d2, bishop goes to g4.
I was gonna
And
when I said
now,
both pawns queen, I meant the a and the e pawns. So we're both gonna stack
okay.
and then we're gonna both have a and e pawns at queen. Nuts, totally nuts. Wait, what? But your line is also interesting with e5 instead of d2.
Okay, so I was thinking e5. I don't think it makes a difference. So
yeah, so bishop e6.
one
Take
takes.
on g7, takes.
Which way do I clear the path? I think I might clear the path. Actually, I'm trying to. Yeah, but this bishop can hold off these two pawns.
I would go d2 and just say, what the heck?
I was trying to get everything. I was trying to get these.
Oh,
pawns
you're trying to win this game. Okay,
and then,
you're trying to.
well, to be
Okay.
fair, I did have a winning position with the black.
Very
pieces.
fair. Very fair. More than fair.
Yeah, but the issue is that even if you try to chase down this a pawn, this bishop can easily hold those two pawns, and it's just going to be a draw.
Actually
and you
instructed
hold it like
how to hold that pawn though. So let's actually show the folks at home how you hold those pawns, because if the e pawn gets to e3, then you can't hold them, right?
no.
So let's say after a6 king b6, let's show the folks at home how to hold the pawns in place. You force them to dark squares and then blockade them.
Yeah, so
So
you can do it by going like say bishop c4,
yeah.
d2. Now you need to cover this, and you have to remember that in order to draw, the bishop needs to dance at two weddings. So therefore, it needs to do
Oh,
it from one diagonal. So all you need to remember is that from this one diagonal, it will hold off 2 pawns. It can easily hold off 3 pawns as well. If there were
how are you at
one of,
dancing at the weddings?
I'm not very good. I'm
Okay,
too
okay.
self-conscious. But on the chess terms, I'm okay.
All right,
But
very
yeah, this
well.
is what you need to remember, and then this king can do the rounding up, and that's going to be a draw. So yeah, let's go back to the original position because h3 g6 played,
My
and
goodness. My goodness.
now
We
it's
still have some
crunch
drama.
time. We certainly do. This game is still there for some twists and turns. So now, how to handle this?
I mean, the simple way, which is not simple, is truly to admit your quote unquote mistake, your path, and say, you know what? I knew I was trying to get funky with the H pawn. I'm going to go rook c1 and just make sure that we semi down for a minute here. That requires real maturity and responsibility and growth and all those synonyms that are, I'm basically touching right now. The logical kind of keep it going way is this takes g2 dynamic. Then you all of a sudden discover that you need to trap the bishop on g2, as we've talked about with the rook coming back to h8. And it's really not the way you'd want to convert a position if there are multiple options that are more convenient. So that's
Yes.
what we're kind of weighing over now. And fortunately, Tan Zhongyi has a boatload of time to kind of check and
Yes.
recheck and then check again and then and again and again.
Well,
But yeah.
it's the perfect moment for us to take a break because the position is winning for Tan Zhongyi, but she does have an accurate path to tread in order to get the victory. Will she do it? Well, we'll find out after the break.
Ever since the chess engine Deep Blue defeated world champion Garry Kasparov in 1997, computers have been better at chess than even the best humans. Today, the margin isn't even close. Top engines play near-perfect chess, and playing against them is basically futile. But every now and again, there's a chess puzzle that stumps the engines, and us humans can solve it faster. Let's take a look at our first puzzle. So, when we initially look here, the engine, as you can see, still thinks it's a draw. But if left for long enough, eventually it might find the mate in 8 sequence. So, let's look at the first, most intuitive sacrifice, maybe bishop f7. But then after the king takes back, queen follows up with queen h5, king g7. There's no real follow-up. There's no continued attack for white. So if we go back to the initial position, let's try that. Well, I already gave it away. Let's try that in a different move order, where instead of the bishop coming in first, we sacrifice the queen. As humans, of course, we love to sacrifice our queen. It just feels so good. And the king takes, and now we do the bishop check, and you'll see that this critical g6 square is cut off. So the best try for black is to go down here to king h8, and then we have a very quiet but deadly move. So we can bring in knight d2. Not attacking right away, but it's preparing knight f3, which, as you can see, would lead to checkmate. What black can do is try to delay this, maybe by pinning. We can just push here, takes, and now black can only delay the inevitable. They can try f4 here to try to give themselves an escape square, but we just go knight f3 all the same, king g4, and now we have the pièce de résistance, a quiet, subtle e4. Now they have no more moves. No matter what black plays, we have checkmate on the next move. Ooh, how satisfying is that? Looking for new ways to enjoy chess? Check out our schedule of Chess.com community events today. Mondays, play Rapid Opening Roulette and expand your opening repertoire with a new opening each month. Tuesdays, compete against other Untitled players in Untitled Tuesday. Battle your way to the top in Arena Kings on Wednesdays. Join the crazy fun of the Variants Community Series each Thursday. And finish the week off each Saturday with the blistering Community Bullet Brawl. All happening in the Community Club on Chess.com.
I can guarantee that working your way through this course and solving all 1001 exercises will reward you not only with a greater tactical knowledge, but also with spotting more tactics in your own games. My name is Fiona Steil-Anthony and I'm a Women International Master. I wish you a warm welcome to the course 1001 Chess Exercises for Beginners, authored by Franco Mazzetti and Roberto Massa, with videos by me. In this case, the knight on c5 is not protected, and so the winning move is g6. g6 is the discovered attack, but it is also a double attack, because not only are we hitting the knight on c5, we are also threatening mate on h7. In this case, rook c7. Black has no choice but to capture, and now our queen comes in. We've lured the queen away. Now the king is too far removed. It cannot protect the black queen, so we are going to pick up the black queen on the next move.
And we are back for the final game of first round and the women's candidates. It's between Lei Tingjie and Tan Zhongyi. And well, the position has sharpened considerably because Tan Zhongyi is winning, but there may only be a narrow path to victory. And we were discussing this position, Casa, during the break. And we came up with a beautiful way to actually secure the win immediately. And we have to share it, don't we?
Yeah, it had some Searching for Bobby Fischer vibes. If anyone's seen that famous scene at the end where there's a menacing check that turns the tables, it's not a diagonal this time. It's just a vertical file. But let's check this out. So it starts with King F2. So there are other ways to kind of win this game, but this one is kind of forcing and beautiful. The point is that you're threatening here H takes G2, and so white can't ignore that. Essentially, H takes G2, and then G1 check, queen hitting the king on G4, and then also the pawn that might try to make it to G8 just doesn't work out, right?
Because it looks like this is a good move, right? G7, next move is going to be queen. And if black were to go H takes G2, we simply capture. What could be wrong with this approach? Well, white is going to be in for a rude awakening after rook to G1. And there you can see the whole point, because after white promotes to a queen, rook takes bishop, and it is a skewer. And black will be winning. What a beautiful shot.
Yeah, it's definitely one for the gallery. It is It is consistent with the G5 play that we saw earlier in the game that boxed in this king. This king has just been kicked around. Like, this white king has just been just totally kicked around this game, like just taken advantage of, time after time. So it would be another example of that. If you don't go for that path, the other ones are more adversarial, right? And so we spent time before the break of looking at lines with H2. What can be more natural than trying to, get the pawn one step closer to a queening square? But oh, excuse me, it wasn't H2. No, sorry, it was taking on G2 right away. We didn't look at this one. We look at H2 after, but taking on G2 right away. Bishop takes G2, and here you start to notice, oh my gosh, the king can come up to support the G7 pawn, the G pawn after G7. We start with G7.
Sorry, G7.
Hitting the rook on H8. The rook swings over to G8. And then
here we can't defend. So
here
it
we
has
can.
to be king.
It has to be king
defend.
G5 first.
Yeah, it has to be king to G5 first. And now here, the big threat is to go G7. And now the only move in this position is once again to use this mighty warrior. Oh, we have a move, Casa. And the only move is to go king to F2. What was played?
What was played? We saw the hand move. Do we have an update? We do. King F2 was played.
Oh,
okay, we might get a nice finish. We might get. This has been a beautiful game. I mean, really, like, this has been a beautiful game. Wow. We are chat. We might get some searching for Bobby Fischer vibes. Vertical file edition, not diagonal edition with promotion, but still, that would be pretty darn cool.
Yeah, that would be seriously most impressive. I love this move, king F2. This king has been an absolute stalwart of the game, coming up to F6, coming to E5, and then trapping the king to E3, and then for Tang to see. This amazing resource, just to re-emphasize, is that after G7, it looks like this pawn is unstoppable. But all black needs to do is play H takes G2, only move, and it's good enough. Because after bishop takes G2, here is the vertical tower, that vertical line that Casa was talking about. And then there's just no way. Nothing for it.
And this king, I mean, this king on F2 now has been the real hero, right? It's basically played bully ball the entire game. I'm thinking now of, like, we're in March Madness here in the States with college basketball, and this king has been like that that center from NC State, essentially, that's in the Final Four right now. This king started on a journey from F8. Well, it was on E8 at the beginning of the day. It started from F8. It meandered from G7 to F6 to E5 to D4 to E3 to F2. And it's just been a massive, massive hero. And, we hear this adage all the time that, in the end game, a king is active piece, use it. But really, some of the work was done even earlier. It was, getting that king into position, even in the late middle game, to even give yourself the opportunity to have it assert itself in the end game. And it was the king's positioning, more so than the extra pawn, frankly, that did white's position in. So it just goes to show how important piece play is, and a king can be a part of that, particularly with the queens off the board.
Yeah, just to show the position that you're talking about, here it is. The king is there on E3. The white king is stuck in a mating net. And this was the whole idea, that G5 is being threatened. And if white were to play any old move, to B8, then D4 would be played.
Yeah, let's say A5, just so they can see the checkmating idea. Just so they can see that checkmating idea.
Yeah, okay, so A5 and now G5, and here it is. Beautiful.
Do you see my face? Do you see that's a stank face. That's the terrible. Oh, beautiful. Just amazing. Like, you just don't see this every day, especially at this level.
No, absolutely not. You don't see it that every single piece that white has on the board is just badly placed. This bishop on F3, it's in the way. This rook on A8, doing nothing, is jammed in by its own pawn on a5. And, well, fair play to Lei. She did find a tricky way to hold on, and that was by playing after the move. After this move, hang on, let's go back. Let me get the right position. And in this particular position, she tried her luck with rook to e8, and how after g5 she went for this. And this one, must be fair, must be said, it looks pretty scary after g6. But Tan Zhongyi showing her class, finding king f2. What a move.
It's just so
I
cool.
just want to share it again and again. You know, the whole idea is that g7 is going to be met by pawn takes pawn. There's a threat of promotion, so you have to go bishop takes g2, and then here it comes. You just simply go rook to g1, and there is going to be a skewer along the g line, and black is going to be catching that g pawn.
And I see someone in chat. Actually asking, why isn't White resigning? Why isn't she resigning? And I think sometimes you know that the position is the game is over essentially objectively, and you know Lei has essentially known that for a while. But sometimes you have to come to grips with the terms and conditions that are in front of you, and it's a very understandable thing for you to just essentially recognize what's going to happen next and process it before actually extending your hand, because it can be such a cold shower to discover a detail late that you essentially didn't foresee before. I mean, she might have easily been looking at the lines where the rook was coming back to h8 that we thought were really tricky, and then it was like, oh my god, I didn't even consider king f2, and then you realize it, and it's a cold shower. I've literally been there, Jovi. I'm sure you've been there, where it turns your perspective from I have a chance to I have no chance, and it is chilling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is chilling, and it happens all the time, right? You face an unexpected move and you think you're in with a shot, and suddenly it's all over. And this is one of those moments. But also remember that we are privy to the evaluation bar. We know that the position is completely busted for Lei. She doesn't know that. She's desperately looking at every single resource possible. You never won a game by resigning. That's a famous adage.
True. I will say though, she knows that Lei is of the class now. She with the king on f2, she knows it's a wrap. We're also under 1 minute now, so she might actually wind up extending her hand. But she knows what's happening now, and it's processing that reality.
Yeah. Remember, this is the candidates tournament. This is one of the biggest events in each of these players' careers. The winner of the candidates will challenge four-time women's world champion Ju Wenjun. And there we have a move from Lei, king to f4. And still tricky.
I mean, it's nervy. I mean, the instinct again is to actually play h2, but then you actually allow white to queen also, and then it's like, yeah, it's weird. You can also take on g2, but now again there's this little trick. We got to show this trick. Yeah. H takes g2, bishop takes g2, king takes g2. Let's just show the trick. And then g7, and all of a sudden it's very unclear how you stop this g-pawn. And I can tell you right now, you'd have to find some study-like gymnastics to get your rook to actually come up to make contact with that g-pawn. This is not fun.
You can still do it.
You can, but this is work. This is a lot of work. This is
you have to go like this, and
day.
You have to kind of go your king to h3 or something like that. Can I not go king to g3 and then king
f6?
Okay, wait, hang on. She's made a move. Rook a1, clinical.
Okay.
This is gonna put it in the bag.
Fiscally
g7
responsible.
is gonna be met by rook takes a4, and this rook will just come down to a8. The pass pawn is that prisoner, must be kept under lock and key. This is it. It's game over. No way back from this one for Lei.
And also, g takes h3 now will render the bishop on f3 unprotected after rook takes a4. So the bishop will just be caught. The king will no longer be able to protect that bishop on f3. So essentially, this is the move that will probably lead to the handshake. So, oh, I stand corrected. I stand corrected. We do have g7.
Okay.
And
Expecting rook takes a4 check.
all right, is there more to calculate here? Rook takes a4 check,
No.
king e5.
Yeah, but then you just drop your. Don't you drop your rook back to a8? I
No,
don't
but
see
then
why
can I? Okay,
this
yeah.
bishop
Okay.
is.
Okay, yeah,
I
you still
don't
can.
know why I need to go into any fancy things.
Okay, cool. All right, no
And
double,
then
no
just
queen,
go
no two queens, no double queenings or anything like that. Just chill, just chill. Okay, I like
yeah,
that.
h takes g2.
All right,
Everything is good. I think.
calm, cool, and collected.
Rook takes a4 check.
Oh
Okay,
no,
king
you
goes
can see
out
the
to.
arbiter in the background was hovering there, like the arbiter senses some change here as well. Here we go, king g5, and
Rook a8.
yeah, that would be
Stop that pawn
the
from
way.
promoting.
That would be the way. You can also, this would be insane, but you can also play h2, allow white to queen, and then you queen, and then white actually has no checks. But why in the world would you allow that? Why? Why play with madness with the stakes that are on the line in this event? So, drama is dangerous. I see in the chat someone saying, is h takes g2 fine? It is not. It is not. Because actually, after h takes g2, bishop takes
Bishop takes
g2,
g2.
very different story now. Very different story, because the g8 queen's a threat. The rook comes back to a8 to stop that queen, and now the bishop will go to h3 and start to harass the pawns and support an eventual queen. So very different story. And so you got to be alert even till the end. And Tan Zhongyi's been alert thus far, but it's so funny. We talked about your plan. This was at the very beginning of this trickiness, was rook a8, end the game. Rook a1, rook a8, get the rook back, end the game. And it was all this little stuff with h4, h3 or h3 rather, that threw in the spanner, made things a little bit more murky. So, and now we're finally coming back to your plan.
And you're seeing g takes h3.
Oh my gosh.
I didn't calculate this one. I just assumed with the d pawn running,
the resources
it would
are
be more than enough.
unbelievable.
No, but the d pawn has to start running. Okay.
But let's
nice.
Let's just appreciate that, like the pawn running like that. Okay, we have a result.
So we saw rook to g8. Beautiful defense from Tan Zhongyi, and she takes the first decisive game against Lei Tingjie. What a great performance from Tan Zhongyi with the black pieces. Some incredible moves that she found there right at the end. And there you can see the players. They're analyzing, and that brings us to the results. There have been 3 draws. Fighting chess all round, but it was Tan Zhongyi who defeated Lei Tingjie to take the very early lead.
Incredible, really incredible stuff. We had an incredible game here. So many cool moments. The mating net that was found with g5 and the king darting down the yellow brick road on those dark squares down to e3 to play g5. The pawn race at the end that seemed like an unnecessary skirmish that gave up some counterplay. Ultimately, Tan Zhongyi kept control. Really cool stuff. And there are 13 rounds to go. So no one is out of it after this round. Yeah, we saw some stars shine.
Absolutely. And we still see there the standings. Tan Zhongyi at the top with 1 point. It's a classical scoring system, and 3 matches did finish in a draw. So we do see Anna Mazichik, Salimova, Goreshkina, Katerina Lagno, Vaishali, and Humpy all there with half point, and Lei Tingjie at the bottom. You called it there, Casa. It is a long event, 14 rounds in total, 13 rounds left to go. And there we can see tomorrow's pairings. There we also see their prior scores with each other. Katerina Lagno faces off against Humpy Koneru, the 2 most experienced players in the competition. Tan Zhongyi plays Vaishali. Remember, they faced each other in the Grand Swiss last year. Vaishali was dominant there. Salimova plays against Lei Tingjie, Goreshkina against Anna Muzichik. Anything catch your eye, Casa?
I'm going to be really curious to see how folks bounce back after today's round. I think Lei is still very much a candidate to actually win this whole thing, and I'm looking forward to seeing what type of strategy she has going into her next game. I also can't help but mention the Muzichuk-Goreshkina matchup is going to be very interesting. So it'll be very interesting to see how those games develop, and I'm so excited that I'll be with you tomorrow.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. But what a day of chess it has been. 4 fighting games of chess. Either game could have turned in either direction, but in the end, it was Tan Zhongyi with the black pieces who did defeat Lei Tingjie to take the early lead. And tomorrow, well, we can be guaranteed one more thing. That's going to be more of the same. I'll be back, Castle will be back, and we'll see you at the same time for more of the action. Until tomorrow, see you then.